Before getting into the content, I thought I would take a quick moment to introduce myself again. My name is Dr. Amanda Latz. I am a US-based researcher and professor, and I've been working with photovoice for the past almost 20 years. Much of my work has been with college students, and as you can see on the far left, this is a photo of me and a number of college students actively engaged in a photo voice project in the spring of 2024. On the far right, you'll see a photo of me with some colleagues at the most recent convening of the American Educational Research Association, where we were giving a workshop on how to facilitate liberatory research teams, collectives, and labs. And I was able to share some insights from my work with photo voice. And then last but not least, in the middle, you'll see the cover of my 2017 book, all about the photo voice methodology, which came to fruition after using photo voice for my dissertation and a variety of other projects. And it is actually the resource that brought me here today to working with you all on this project and creating this video. So again, I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope this gives just a touch of my background and my positionality as it relates to photo voice. So what are my intentions for this video? I really have three intentions, and they are as follows. We can also think about these as learning goals for viewers. I want to engage you in a variety of hands-on activities and share with you some ways that we might build empathy with those who we're going to be engaging in the photo voice project. In other words, taking you through some activities to help you understand what it's like to be a participant in a photo voice project. Next, I want to help you all understand some of the key components, phrases, and concepts related to photo voice. And then third, work with you to develop some ideas related to building menus for your learners as they carry out the photo voice projects that you're going to be a part of. So let's get right into our first hands-on activity. And I'm going to ask you periodically to pause your video so that you can have a chance to actually engage in these activities as you watch. So I want to take you through the instructions, and after I do that, you may want to actually pause the video so that you can do this activity. So the instructions are as follows. I want you to take a new photograph with your smartphone in response to the following question. How are you feeling about the upcoming photo voice project? Nothing complicated, just answer the question in the form of a photograph. Two rules, however, please do not take a photograph of another person or anything illegal in your context. And then once you've done that, we'd like you to attach the photograph to an email and send it to me. My email is on the screen, aolatz@bsu.edu. And then within the body of that email, write a caption to accompany your photograph. This can be as simple as a phrase or a few sentences, whatever you prefer. And then lastly, at the bottom of the slide, I say, I promise to acknowledge receipt and write you back. So this is the point at which you may want to pause the video and actually do that activity, and I will see you on the other side. Now, I wanted to share a few examples from others who have engaged in this activity through live workshop number 2. We had a process by which folks were asked that question and asked to contribute to a shared Google slide deck. And I have some images here that I want to share with you because I love them. So this is a really beautiful and interesting photograph. And the caption for this one reads as follows. A mess of strange, colorful, tangled things bursting through an orderly gray surface. I hope the activity will be just like it, vibrant, messy, unexpected, and fun. That's example 1. Next example, this beautiful dog. Just as my beloved dog looks forward to food, I look forward to the upcoming LPI piloting photo voice. I believe it is important to listen to students and provide opportunities for them to express themselves in new ways. I'm feeling curious and expectant. Love this one. Next, we have an image of a plant. We had several of these, which I loved. The caption is, when I received the plant in the photo, it was tiny. It has been growing at work alongside me. Now it's so big that I'm slowly running out of space to put it. It evokes feelings in me that our work is important, has broad impact, and that through the project, I'm gradually gaining more and more experience, which I can apply and continue to grow and use this experience to help create a high quality of inclusive environment in our schools and for all students. So let's debrief. You may want to pause the video again here, maybe write down your answers to these questions. This is the part of the activity where we have an experience and then we engage in some reflection and some debriefing to help build empathy with our learners. So here are the debriefing questions. How did you decide what to photograph? What tacit knowledge did you draw upon during this photography process? In conveying your message, which was more important, the image or the caption? Why? What felt good, easy, or fluid about this process? What felt frustrating, difficult, or clunky about this process? And finally, what did this experience teach you about photo voice? And how can that learning be applied during the piloting? Again, I think your responses to these questions will be really helpful in building empathy with your learners as you engage them with the photo voice process. So, as we transition away from this first activity, I want to leave you with a quote from Salvador Dali. Knowing how to look is a way of inventing. Important to think about, reflect on, and consider as we engage with photo voice now and going forward. Okay, so let's think about what photo voice is. And ahead of that, let's think about some of the guiding theories, its aims, and its deployment. So first, the guiding theories. Photo voice sits on top of a theoretical tripod. One leg of the stool, or the tripod, is education for critical consciousness. The next is drawn from feminism or feminisms. There are many. And the third is participatory documentary photography. Its aims come from those theories. We want to build critical consciousness in those with whom we are working on photo voice projects. We want to make space for participants to make images on their own terms. And we want to be able to create platforms where their voices can be amplified. And through our work, we want to reach policymakers in order to instigate positive change. In terms of the deployment of photo voice, in my book, I articulate a number of steps, and these steps are meant to be seen as cyclical rather than a waterfall. And they are as follows. Ideating. What is this project going to be about? Inviting. Thinking about who we would like to invite to the project as participants or co-researchers. Educating. Talking to our group in terms of what photo voice is, how to take photos, what are the logistics involved in the project. Next, participants or co-researchers are making images through photography. They're then narrating those images through either focus groups or interviews. They're theming. In other words, they're identifying and creating patterns within the data, the images and the narrations. They're presenting the work. They're presenting the culminating images and captions with outside audiences. And then they're confirming as to whether or not the aims of the project have been met. At the bottom of this slide, I have what I think is a really excellent YouTube video that shares the Photo Voice project overall that I would highly recommend. Okay, so let's think about some key terms as it relates to Photo Voice. So Photo Voice is a methodology. It is an approach to inquiry. And I would again reiterate that Photo Voice is a methodology. It is a total approach to inquiry. A method is a tool used to generate data. And in photovoice, the main tool that we are using to generate data are photo-elicited interviews or focus groups. And these are the methods that we are using underneath the broad umbrella of photovoice. So we're thinking about photovoice as our guiding methodology and photo elicitation using participant generated photos as our main method underneath the photovoice methodology. I also want to emphasize that photovoice is considered to be a form of critical participatory action research. It's critical insofar as it is concerned with power. It is participatory insofar as the students or the participants of our photovoice projects are not passive subjects. They are active participants and they are involved in a variety of components that make up the total project in varying degrees. This kind of research is action oriented insofar as we are trying to do something in the world rather than just, or not just, but rather than only create new knowledge. We're interested in creating new knowledge, but we're also interested in doing work in the world. And it's research in that it is a form of systematic inquiry. Some additional points. Photovoice was created in the mid-90s as a tool to better understand marginalized groups and support the facilitation of meaningful change that will be beneficial to those groups. Since its inception, photovoice has been used and misused quite widely within the literature. It's also been adapted in a lot of interesting ways based on, for example, cultural relevance, the cultural relevance of photography in various settings. Photo voice, I want to emphasize, is no more or less rigorous than other methodologies, although sometimes it is still considered marginal or not as rigorous as other methodologies, particularly those that are quantitative. And carrying out a photo voice project is, while it can be fun and exciting, it's also quite complex, nuanced, and involves many more logistical considerations than you might imagine at first glance. All right, so I want to take us through another hands-on activity, and you can feel free to pause the video at any point during this activity. What we are going to do is we are first going to look at a series of photographs. And what I would like you to do as you view these photographs is first, would like you to write down how the photograph makes you feel. Just how the photograph makes you feel. And you can do this by writing in sentences, jotting down words, whatever first comes to mind will be perfect. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but the first pass, we're going to be writing about how these images make us feel. So let's get to it. Here is the first image. And again, you may want to pause the video and just jot down how this particular image makes you feel. I'm going to move on to the second image. Here's this one. We'll be looking at a total of 3. And I should also note that these are all images that were taken as part of photovoice projects that I was a part of facilitating. And finally, this image. Okay. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to go back through these images for a second time. And during the second pass through these images, you're going to be writing down all of the characteristics of the photo that you can think of. You might think about things like color, perspective, lighting, background, and foreground. So let's go back to the first one. And again, just jotting down every characteristic of the photo that you can think of. Here's the second one again. And finally, the third. Okay. Once you have these two sets of jottings, let's go through some debriefing questions. Now, this is another place in the video you might want to pause and write down your responses as a way of journaling, again, as a way of building empathy. So the debriefing questions are as follows. What were some of the words you wrote down in response to how these images made you feel? And then what were some of the characteristics of the photos that you wrote down? In what ways can you map the relationships between the characteristics of the photos and how these images made you feel? Think about why any of this matters in the context of photo voice. And lastly, what did this experience teach you about photo voice, and how can that learning be applied as you move forward into your project? All right, we're going to move on. But before we move on, I'm going to leave you with a quote that that's often attributed to Anais Nin, but may not actually be from her. But she said, perhaps, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Important in the context of photo voice, I think. All right, and we're going to move on to our third and final hands-on activity, which is all about developing menus alongside learners as it relates to your photo voice projects. So for this one, I want you to take out a piece of paper, and we're going to be thinking about creating menus for our students, those who are going to be participating in our photo voice projects. I don't know about you, but when I go to a restaurant, it's comforting to look at the menu. If you were to go into a restaurant and the waiter came to your table and said, "What would you like for dinner?" and there was no menu, you might be overwhelmed with the possibilities. But having a menu can give us nice boundaries around what's possible. And having boundaries around the possible can sometimes make us feel like a task is more doable, more manageable. And I think menus are a great way to think about getting started with our photo voice projects, and creating these menus alongside our learners is particularly helpful, I think. So let's think about how we can create menus throughout the project life cycle, alongside our learners. So I think one place to start might be, what are 3 potential photography prompts that we might want to use with our projects? So if we're thinking about the social and emotional experiences that learners have through school, how might we inquire? How might we create a menu of prompts that might yield some interesting data? So an example might be, what is the best part of school? Another example might be, what is the most challenging part of school? Another example might be, when do I feel most comfortable at school? And if we think about the potential ways learners might respond to those questions or prompts, we think about ways that we might open up possibilities to better understand their experiences. The next menu, we would think about creating 3 different ways to create photographs or images. So how might we do this? And how might you create this menu alongside your learners in order to figure out what you actually want to use? So one example might be to use an instant camera. Another example, of course, would be a digital camera, might be a smartphone, might be iPads, might be other tablets or pieces of tech. I'm going to draw or jot these ideas down, creating a menu. Next would be 3 different ways to keep the project organized. You might have a cloud file storage system through your school. Another potential way to organize the logistics and organizing the projects overall would be to use Google Drive. I've used Google Drive for a number of photo voice projects and found it to be really helpful. You might even think about analog tools like folders and a file folder system as well. 3 different ways to generate voice to accompany the student photographs. This might be a focus group. This might be one-on-one interviews. This might be the creation of policy posters or captions on post-it notes, or a Google form where students can upload their photographs and write out their captions. And then finally, our last menu would be 3 different ways to share the project findings. So how do you convert all these data into something interesting for other people to experience and look at? So one option is to create a photo voice exhibition. Another option might be a social media account or a website, or even something interesting like a zine or other analog project that could be created, copied, and shared with others. Okay, so some debriefing from this activity. Again, you might want to pause the video and journal out your responses. What ideas stood out to you? How can you encourage learners to participate in the creation of menus throughout the duration of the project? Must each learner participate in the very same way? For example, what if some learners want to use smartphones while others want to use film? Finally, imagine your project unfolding. Are there certain things your learners gravitate toward? Why? What are those things? You know your students best. They might have particular interests that may be different from what you thought or imagined, or maybe different from another group of learners. But you really want to honor and take into account their perspectives and their voices as you build and facilitate the project. Okay. So I want to share some resources and some possibilities, and the purpose of sharing these resources is really to open ideas and give you new ways to consider building out these menus and things that you might model after. So as I mentioned before, this is the interior landscape of a photo voice project that I was a part of facilitating in the spring of 2024 using Google Drive. So you can see here we've got a number of different folders and documents, and all of the folks involved with this particular project had access to this folder. So we had research ethics documents, ethics training certificates, data, photography, all sorts of things here. This is just the interior scaffolding of a particular photo voice project that I was most recently connected to. So something to think about there. This is an image of printed photographs placed into plastic sleeves and organized into a 3-ring notebook. One of the things that is interesting about this photograph is you can see the sticky notes, the pink sticky notes with numbers, and you can see the rectangular post-it notes on these as well. So how I used this was I printed out photographs. This is actually from my dissertation, from participants who use film as part of their participation in the project. And when I met with students to do one-on-one interviews about the photos that they had taken in response to the prompts that I had created on the recording, on the interview recording and subsequent transcripts, I needed a way to connect the photographs to the content of what they were saying. So I asked them, okay, tell me about photograph number 20, or tell me about photograph number 16 or 21. And by numbering the photographs, I had a clearer point of reference within the analysis of the transcripts. Another thing to note here is that the colors of the post-it notes were connected to the themes of the the data analysis process. So I was able to then easily connect transcripts to photographs and photographs to themes, which were helpful in building the exhibition. So I wanted to show you this as another example. And in the background, you can also see the printed transcripts of the interviews. Next, you see an image from the spring of 2024. This was us as a team coming together and actually practicing creating a miniature photo voice exhibition. So you can see on the wall, we had a variety of instant photographs and smartphone photographs that were Bluetooth printed on a small Polaroid portable printer. We also had photographs up on the screen digitally, and we were working on a wall that was converted into a whiteboard so that we could iterate and draw right on the board and have our images and our captions right there. So this was us kind of iterating our way through the analysis and the eventual exhibition. So having a space like this was really helpful in this case. This is us again, just a picture of us in the space where we met to work through our photo voice project. We had students, pardon me, we had students working on captioning. You see some tape here. You see an instant photograph, instant camera, pardon me, and just some fidget items here for the students to work with and just kind of practice and play around with the prompts and see what worked and didn't work as we went. This was an example of us trying to thematize our data and creating overall themes, sub-themes, and then some specific examples. How do students learn best? They learn in spaces that are comfortable. They learn when the learning is malleable and they can make sense of it in relationship to their own experiences. And they learn best when faculty are personable and invested in students. Excuse me, they sought support from inside the institution through involvement, belonging, resources, and campus personnel. So this was us again iterating and doing some thematizing right on the board. This here is an example of a flyer advertising the exhibition, the photo voice exhibition that was coming up. You can see that was hosted in the summer of 2024. Again, we put these flyers up on social media. We printed some, put them up in physical locations, and then that led to our event program. I don't believe that QR code is working at this point, but one of the things that's really important for folks who come to your exhibition to know that there's a difference between a photography exhibition and a photo voice exhibition. And what this program allowed us to do was to be very clear about what this exhibition was all about. And if you plan to host an exhibition in your school or in a space that makes sense for you, even if that's not inside your school, I would think that a program that helps viewers, attendees to the exhibition really understand what's going on is key. And here's one example of that. This was a photograph of our actual exhibition. You can see how we organized the space. Each area was dedicated to a particular theme based on our data analysis. On the far left, you'll see that we had an easel with some markers and a big, large pad of paper so that attendees could write down their thoughts. Not in the picture, but on the far left, we had a small stage set up where attendees could sit down, and then we heard remarks from our participants about the project, which was really impactful. If you're looking for a wonderful website resource, I would encourage you to take a look at the FAD on Campus project, fadoncampus.com, a great example of a US-based research team and their photo voice website, which I think is a really accessible and interesting way to showcase projects. That project also culminated in a book. Again, there are, pardon me, more than one ways to exhibit. And if we think about that really broadly, a website, a book, all of these types of things are ways to exhibit our work and get it out into the broader public. All right. Well, we have come to the end of this video. I just want to say thank you for following along. Put my full name and my email address there if you'd like to be in touch. Would be more than happy to engage with you. And I wish you all the best. And again, I've been very happy to be a part of this project and excited to see where it goes. Thanks again.